Okay, this is Monica Kapuria, Associate Professor, School of Management. I'll be taking in MBA classes for third semester. As you can see the whiteboard, the paper that I'll be taking, it is an HR major specialization called as Industrial Relations and Labor Legislations. Very well evidently, it can be bifurcated into two parts. The first part covers the IR part, that is the industrial relation, and the second part covers the labor legislation, that is more about the laws that are enacted for the social security welfare of the laborers. So just giving a brief introduction about the syllabus, why you are studying this paper, why it is an important part of HR, why all HR specialist people need to study about the labor legislations, why it is important for them to understand what is the dynamics of industrial relations. Industrial relations can be very briefly, in a nutshell, can be explained as a relationship between the three parties, namely the employer, the employee, and industry. So now the question pops is, these are the three components of IR, that is the employer, employee and industry. But what about the relationship between them? Yes, the relationship between them is regulated in the term industrial relation by maintaining the relationship between worker, that is the employee, and management. Again, between the worker and worker, and between the employer and employer. So there are three parties like worker and management, relationship between the worker and worker, and between the management, that is the employer and the employee, that is within the industries. So this is the first part. It will cover about what is the industrial dispute, how they are handling the conflicts, what is the grievance handling machinery, how they move about with the grievance procedure, what is the process of collective bargaining over, what is the workers' participation. That means this portion, that is a part 1 of the paper, would cover the entire aspects and entire dynamics of the industrial relations. Number 2 part, that is the labor legislation. Labor here can also be represented with the word employee. Worker we call basically the people who are blue collar, that is who work in a field, they are laborers, they are in the manufacturing units, for example BD workers, contractual workers, and the employees are the white collar, that is the executives, the managers, the assistant manager. But there is certain legislation that have been enacted to provide them security, welfare, the protection and the regulation for their upliftment, so that they may not be exploited by the employers or they are not mistreated by the management. So there are various acts that will come into it, like you will have Mines Act, you will have Factories Act, you will have Workers' Compensation Act, you will have Maternity Benefit Act, you will have Workers' Compensation Act, you also have Payment of Wages Act, Minimum Wages Act, Payment of Bonus Act, ESI Act, EPF Act, and many more acts. We'll come to it in further lectures. So this is the small introduction about the paper. Now second aspect that comes in, why you are supposed to study this paper, how it is important for you as an MBA student. Very well said. We are working as an HR manager. We might be working in a service industry, we might be working in a manufacturing industry. So now we have to deal as an HR person, since HR is a backbone of an industry that maintains the causal relationship between the workers and the management. He is a bridge between the two. So he needs to have that way so that he can have an entire knowledge about his employees and the workers that he's working for. So HR always works for the betterment and upliftment of the management and also for the welfare of the workers. So now he has to maintain the record of all the laborers, what are they earning, how they are earning, how much they earn, what are the wages that they're getting, what is to be paid when they met with an accident in a factory, how they are following the norms of the factory, what is the minimum wage that they are supposed to get, what are the ESI standards, how to take care of the laborers within the company, whether it is a service industry, whether it's a industrial, whether it is a manufacturing industry. So if you as an HR manager has a hold over all these legislation, so you can do your work in a better way and you can assist the management so that you can work in hand with the management to provide the better facilities to the class, that is labor, because they might be literate, they might be illiterate also. So this is a brief introduction about the paper. Now moving ahead with the paper. Now the one things that comes in that, what is the labor? Labor has two meanings here. One, it denotes the worker, and the other, it denotes the works that he done. The works that he does. The labor, put up the effort in order to generate the output by using various raw material to produce as per the requirement of the customer. In lieu of what? In lieu of certain money, wages. So whatever money he gets, he always earns in lieu of the work, the labor that he does in order to generate the desired output by the customer. This is the labor. So there were various factors that need to be considered, that what is a labor, who is a labor, what were the various legislation carried out for the labor, and many more. Like for example, now later on, coming on to the past, let's dwell on a little bit history of what is this labor, क्यों ये labor आया, what happened, why it migrated. So we are going into the history. Then there was a lot of unrest, lack of employment, so there was migration of laborers from rural areas to the urban areas. Why they migrated? They migrated because there was lack of employment in the villages. There was lack of employment on the there was lack of employment. There was no stability in the job. They migrated in search of food, better standard of living, and so on. They migrated. Now why? How come they migrated from rural areas to the urban areas? When industrialization, due to industrialization, there was a lot of impact that caused these workers to migrate from rural areas to the urban areas. So industrialization has brought a lot of professionalism. There were very much benefits of the industrialization. Industrial brought about a lot of upliftment and development within the India. There were a lot of foreign companies that came to India. They want to invest in India. That raised the standard of the people, generated employment, and as a result, these workers from the rural areas migrated to the urban areas, and in industrialization caused an impact over the economy of the India, because there were several things like, pehle what used to happen, there was one person who used to manage the business. He was the owner and he was the manager. So due to industrialization, a new branch came up, a new profession came up, that was management. They were experts of management. The manager's post was created because with the expansion of the business, it was not possible for the owner to take care of the production, the marketing, the accounts, the hiring, and the welfare facilities for the employees. So a new branch emerged, that was the management, and there was a lot of vacancy that came up for the managers, a different category of manager with a different kind of skilled workforce. Secondly, there was a rise of foreign investment in India in an industry. How come? There were two kinds of an investment. First, it was through collaboration, or secondly, by the subsidiary companies of these companies. So the entire investment made by the foreign companies were by either by collaborating with an Indian company or by making the subsidiaries companies within the Indian sector. So there were a lot of MNCs that came up, that is a multinational company, and that raised the standard of the employment and generated a lot of job for the skilled and unskilled workforce. Third, industrialization, also called technological advancement. Obviously, when foreign companies are investing in India, in an industry, in an Indian industry, in collaboration with the parent company, so a lot of technologies needs to come up. Just because of the technology, the workers learned many new skills, the workers developed themselves, and apart from that, they learned the art of producing the output at the minimum cost and the error-free. So there was four kind of impact due to industrialization. First was professional management. There was a new branch emerged that was known as management. Secondly, there was a rise of the public sector. Third, foreign investment in an Indian industry. And fourth, there was the technical advancement as well. But what caused the impact on the Indian labor? Indian labor के ऊपर क्या impact हुआ due to industrialization? First, for the status of the worker enhanced. The worker felt there was the uplift, the uprise of the status. Working with industry and migrating from the villages to the cities in search of food, shelter, better standard of living, the better salaries and wages. They tried to learn new skills through the technological advancement. As a result, they were able to earn more and their status also rise. They were earning more, they were having a better standard of living, they were able to maintain the minimum standards, they were able to provide better education to their children. They could also send in some kind of money, a chunk of money to their villages for their family, for their children, for the better amenities they could provide to their family. Second was like stabilization of the workforce. Workforce comprised of the white collars and blue collars. Since they were earning better, so there was no point migrating from one point to other. They tend to stabilize themselves. They tend to be still at the place where they are working. They were more committed to the organization, to the industry where they were working, because they were getting better benefits, they were getting better wages, they were getting better salary, they were getting better incentives, bonus, and they were able to maintain that status quo, and hence they decided to be stable because they migrated to get the stability, because there was lack of stability in the village. So they wanted to move, and they moved, and the result was that they had the better status, and they also were able to stabilize themselves. So the workforce was stabilized. Also, there was healthy working environment. This industrialization also brought a healthy work environment. There was a various enactment that kept the employer to maintain the basic amenity, the welfare, the cleanliness and the hygiene factor within the industry. They were abided, they were forced to follow certain laws that we have discussed and will be discussing in detail and will coming up in further lectures. So they were a very congenial, very safe, very healthy, very clean, very hygienic environment for the workers. So previously they were working in a very dingy environment, but with the advent of the industrialization, their status changed and they were able to work in the healthy work environment provided by their employer. Then there were also protective legislation. Protective, by protection, word protective is coming from the word protection. Protective legislation, there were various legislations that provided to protect the workers, the employees from the exploitation of the employers or from the management. So due to industrialization, the protective legislations were also enacted. Further, what about the composition of the workforce? Composition consists of, there were various kinds of mix, a blend of women, men, various age groups, ethnicity, and various kind of people coming from culture. There was cultural diversity that was seen. Cultural diversity was seen. In nutshell, there was heterogeneity among the workers. So people from all bags of lives, all culture, all diverse area came and migrated and joined the industry in order to get themselves a better sense of living. Moving on. With this, there was the growth of trade unionism also. Trade unions also. Trade unions were the body that were constituted with the help of 7 members. There were the 7 members who constitute the trade union to work for the welfare and security and for the benefits of the workers. So there's a proper trade union act that governs the trade union. So trade unions are always governed by the Trade Union Act, which we will study in coming up the lectures. There was one of the very important legislation being enacted in order to provide the security and to fight for the rights of the workers. So this was about the impact of the industrialization on the Indian labor. We have discussed what was the impact of the industrialization in India. Now one more important thing that pops in the mind of people are the features of the industrial labor. What were the characteristics? Of Indian labor? We have studied a lot of things about the labor, what caused the migration, what was the impact of industrialization, but it is very vital for us to understand that what was the nature and characteristics of the labor. We have been discussing that there was a lot of cultural diversity among the labor, but still there were a lot of characteristics that demarcated the labor from one another. There were a lot of differences among the labor. So the first characteristics is that they have a rural background. Since workers migrated from rural areas, that is the villages to the urban areas, for the search of job, for the better employment facilities, for the better standard of living. So they have a very kind of a background that is known as a rural background, and they hail from the villages because initially they were indulged into farming and agricultural activities. Second is that the level of literacy. People were not educated, they were not literate, so they were educated, not very well educated, so the level of literacy was very low. They didn't went to school, they were only involved into various activities, agriculture, farming and harvesting the crops, so they never went to school, so they migrated from rural and urban area. They were not literate as per the standard of the urban life and the industrial expectations, so they were not educated at all. Apart from that, there was a predominance of male workers. When we were studying the composition of the workforce, we studied that the male and female, both men and women, migrated to urban areas for search of job, for search of the better standard of living. But the ratio of men is to women was very less. Women used to take care of the household activities, they were not allowed to migrate, yet some of them were able to migrate, who were the wholesale owners of the family. But the male were the majority people who migrated from rural areas to the urban area in search of the job. So there was a lot of predominance of the male workers. Heterogeneity among the workers, cultural diversity. Since workers hail from different kind of culture, background, ethnicity, language, different kind of states, so there was a lot of heterogeneity and the cultural diversity that was seen among the workers that causes the lack of unity among them. Everybody is coming from the different background, everybody has a different kind of social thinking, different kind of standard, different kind of ambitions, different kind of a language. So they were not together when the work was there, work was given to them. So there was a lot of dispute and conflict among the workers that resulted into absenteeism and labor turnover. That resulted into absenteeism and labor turnover. Since they were in conflict with their peers, their fellows, the other workers, so they were dissatisfied, so they tend to abscond themselves from the job and they tend to move the job and hop from one job to another. And they were migratory in nature. Migratory in nature. They were not satisfied with the job because of the conflict, because of the heterogeneity, resulted into absenteeism and absconding from the job, and that resulted into migration and hopping them from one place to another, from one city to another, from one industry to another, and so on. So this is the characteristics of an Indian labor. Like they were from the rural background, their level of literacy was very low, there was a predominance of the male workers, the heterogeneity among workers, cultural diversity was seen, that causes lack of unity among them, that resulted in absenteeism and labor turnover, and yet their migratory character of the workers. That was the characteristics and the nature and the introduction of the labor, the workers, impact of the industrialization, the causes of the industrialization. But what are the labor laws? Also called as labor legislations. Also termed as employment laws, employment legislations. Labor laws are used to cover all the laws which have been enacted to deal with the employment, non-employment, working condition, industrial relations, social security, welfare measure for persons employed in an industry. So it refers to all the laws that the government has enacted to provide the social security and protection to their workers, that is their employees. So what were the objectives of labor laws? Objectives of labor laws were twofold. At the first, they provide the healthy environment to the workers. Secondly, they provide for the good relationship between the management and workers. Also, they provide the better facilities, the harmony. Because I just studied, there was a lot of conflict among them because they came from the different kind of background. They safeguard the interest to maintain the cordial relationship within the industry, and also to safeguard the interest of women employed in an industry and children. From where these laws came, how these laws were constituted, what was the background, what were the sources of these labor laws? We all know that Britishers ruled us for many years. So a lot of laws were inspired from their constitution. And our constitution, various case laws. Our constitution speaks about various rights. Rights against equality, rights against exploitation, right to women, right to speech, the fundamental rights. So constitution, Indian constitution was also one of the backbone, that is one of the sources of the labor laws. Case laws, the various kinds of judgment by the Supreme Court, the High Court also serve the basis to formulate the various kinds of labor laws. Apart from that, the collective agreements between the parties, state laws, international laws, and lastly, the contract of employment. These are the sources of the labor laws. Labor laws, whenever they were constituted, they were taken from various sources, from the various constitutions, the amendments, various case laws, collective agreements between the parties, state laws, international laws, and contract of employment between the parties. One of the very important topic for the point of exam, what is the classification of labor laws? How many types of labor legislations or employment laws were there? So broadly, they are divided into four categories. The first is the protective, second is regulative, then social security, and last welfare. These are the four categories. The total labor legislation classified into four categories. The first is the protective. Protective word is coming from the word protect. That means that they are enacted to protect the interest, the labor standards, and to provide the minimum standards to the workers so as to improve their working condition, to give them safety, to regulate the norms of the employment of the children and women employed in a factory, about the health, welfare, and different kind of facilities. For example, Factories Act, Factories Act 1948, Plantation Act are few of the example of this category of labor laws. Then comes the regulative. The word regulative means to regulate the relationship between the employer and the employee, which means that method for providing the conflict resolution, maintain the relationship between the workers and the trade union. For example, Trade Union Act 1926 was constituted under the Regulative Act. Thirdly, Social Security. Social Security means safety against the contingencies. Contingencies to safeguard the workers from various kinds of contingencies, from the accidents, for example, Workers' Compensation Act and ESI Act, EPF Act. Lastly, welfare legislations that provides for the welfare of the workers, to give them better working condition, hygiene condition. For example, Mines Act and PD Worker Act are mainly enacted for these purposes. So broadly, 4 categories: protective labor laws, regulative labor laws, social security labor laws, and welfare legislative labor laws. So we have studied broadly about what is it industrial relations all about, what are the various kinds of labor legislation, what is the categories, what is the sources, what was the impact of the labor legislation, what are the characteristics of the workers in an industry, why do workers migrate, and various other factors of the industry, the migration and the characteristics of the labor. So that's all for today's lecture. We'll be continuing more further, we'll be dwelling more into the different kind of the first act, that is the Standing Order Act, in the next lecture. That regulates the relationship, that maintains the employment relationship, that sets the protocol, do's and don'ts of the employment relationship of the employer and the employee. Thank you.